Braveheart was my favorite movie for a good reason. You know, it's heroic and noble and change the world kind of feel to the movie. And so I had, through my teenage years, like this feeling of I want to be William Wallace. That's the lead character who gives his life at the end for the sake of the freedom of his country. And last week, you know, HL shared about martyrs, people men and women through history who've given their lives for the gospel. And that stirred within me this William Wallace feeling that I have inside of me of I just want my life to matter. I want it to count. And I believe that all of us have ingrained in us this same thing, that in our depths, of course, we all want our lives to matter. We all want to live these heroic, noble lives that we know are impacting people and changing things for the better. And yeah, I think that all of us maybe secretly want to be William Wallace. But here we are, driving cars, changing diapers, drinking coffee, working our 9-to-5s. And often my life feels very non-heroic. It just feels really normal and like I'm not making a difference in anybody's life. But as we're studying the Sermon on the Mount, that's the series that we're in, that HL's been teaching us in Matthew chapter 5 is where we've currently been. And Jesus, in that sermon in Matthew 5, he uses 3 scriptures to actually proclaim over us, to tell us who we are. And he uses these words, heroic big words. And before I give you Jesus' heroic big words, let me say that I am used to, like any time I've shared at Daylight, most of the time in the past, it's been when we've been in a movie theater. And if you're new to Daylight, for 5 years we met in a movie theater, so there was this, ginormous screen. And I wasn't really thinking when I made the slides. And so we have these little bitty tiny words that nobody can read. I'm sorry that you can't read the words, but I'll tell you what they say. Okay, Jesus. Jesus says this over our lives in Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So Jesus is saying, he's not saying you're a lowlife or a loser or a dirty, rotten sinner. Like, even though we can feel these things maybe about ourselves, I don't know what your opinion is of yourself today. Maybe it's super low or maybe it's super high. But Jesus, as we read the Bible, we can get a feel for what God's opinion of us is. And after we have said, Jesus, here's my life, unfortunately we don't become perfect. And we still kind of have some things often that need to be worked out. But even in the midst of that, in the working out, in the low self-esteem, and all of that, Jesus, this is what he says about us. He says, you're the light of the world, a city on a hill. These are big and noble. These are William Wallace words. And so as I'm living in the suburbs of Louisville, Kentucky, and not fighting for freedom on the hills of Scotland, this is encouraging to me that Jesus actually has said this over my life. But then so that leaves me with a very common, it seems just kind of makes sense question. How? How do I do that, Jesus? How do I live up to these words you've spoken? How do I become salt? How do I become a city on a hill shining for people to see? Will you teach me, Jesus, how to live like that? So I think it's not hard. You don't have to look far at all to see people who are in need. Right? It's very common for a person's life to have a lot of rips in it that they need mended. It's very common for a person's life to have a lot of dark that needs some light. In this room, there are a lot of rips represented. There's a lot of dark represented. We need, people need you. We need each other to be this, to be salt, to be light to the world around us. And we really do have a royal mission assigned to us by God himself. And it's just encouraging to me that the part of me that longs to fight and to die and to live a life that matters, I love that Jesus has said, okay, like, the reason you feel like that, the reason all of us want to live a life that matters and it makes a difference is because God has wired that within us. That's who God has created us to be. So back to the question, how? How do we do it? I got a couple real simple kind of basic steps here. And in my judgment, the number one way that we learn how to become the light of the world, a city on a hill, is to be really close to God. So I'm a really simple illustration kind of person, so I brought a lamp. This is a lamp. I really like lamps. Like, I maybe have a lamp obsession. And whenever I come, like, if it's my room, like the place that I call my own and hang out, which is currently in Karen H.L.'s daughter's bedroom that they're letting me borrow right now, and somebody turns the overhead lights on, I'm like, no. Overhead lights are good if you're in a hospital or a prison. This is neither one of those things. So I like to shut all the overhead lights off and turn a lamp on because it's just better. It's just better light, cozy, cute. Anyway, I like lamps. And so the thing about a lamp is if it's not plugged in to the wall, it's not doing anything, right? It's got a lot of potential here, but it is not living up to its potential. We can all understand that. So if it's plugged into the wall, which I did earlier, then it becomes who it's supposed to be. And so it very simply, like that's how we are designed. That if we want to use the potential that God has given us, to love and to change the world and to be light and to be salt, we've got to be plugged in to the source of love, the source of light and goodness, which is God. And so intimacy, being intimate with God, being connected with him is the way this happens, right? This is how we live up to our potential. We plug into Jesus and we stay there in friendship, in close-knit relationship with Jesus is how we become the light of the world. It's how we live a life that matters. So I find it encouraging that the lamp isn't stressed. Like, he's not thinking, am I doing enough? Am I shining bright enough for everyone to see? How many people am I affecting? Nah, he's just hanging out. He just plugged into the outlet and doing what he was made to do. And there's peace involved in that thought, that this is how God wants us to live. We just plug in with Jesus. We say, Jesus, I'm your friend. What are you saying? What are you saying to me today? What are you wanting to do today? We read this Bible, we just live in friendship with Jesus, and we don't have to worry, am I shining bright enough? Are people seeing enough? Am I being salt? Am I doing all these things? We can just be. We just plugged into God, and he does it all. When it's just me, like trying to help people, trying to love people, I run out real fast. Fast. I run out. But God has invited me and all of us to be connected to the source. Like, he is endless mercy, endless kind words, endless patience in his conversation. And he's invited me to live connected to him. So he is the one who supplies all of that goodness, which will shine as light to people around me. So being intimate with Jesus. In John chapter 15, John 15 is a beautiful chapter that is one of the best places that I have found to read about being intimate with Jesus. And this is just one scripture of many beautiful ones. And Jesus says that he loves us like the Father loves the Son. And he's asking us to remain in his love, to be plugged in, to just be connected to him. And if this is the place I'm living in, like, I'm going about my day aware of this, that the God of all of creation, the maker of heaven and earth, is in love with me and in love with every human being I'm going to be interacting with all day, I'm not going to be able to help but shine. Like, if this is my reality, it's going to be a lot easier to love people, right? If I'm aware of what's happening actually, that God is in love with all of us and in love with me. So Jesus, help us to live according to John 15:9. Garrett Strew wrote a book about being intimate with God, called The Fruit of Intimacy, and this is a quote from that book, and he says, "When the deep things of a man enter into the deep parts of a woman, a child is conceived. When the deep things of God enter into the deep parts of you, something is conceived in the spirit realm that will change the world. Supernatural fruit comes from a place of supernatural intimacy." Yeah. So Jesus, I just like to remember that the point, like the reason he wants me to shine, the reason he wants me to live plugged in and loving people and helping people is because he wants everybody to know him. That's the point of life. It's the gospel. Why Jesus came to the earth as a man, why he lived a perfect life, why he died and defeated hell and rose up from the dead is because he wants everybody to be in an intimate relationship with him. And so just taking a few sentences out of this verse, he says that the reason you want your light to shine, the reason you want people to see God's goodness inside of you is so that they can glorify God in heaven, that they can know him and be in a relationship with him. That is the point. I talk about Heidi Baker regularly because I believe she deserves to be talked about. She's just living a wonderful life and making quite an impact in people's lives. And she has said this, and she says things like this often: all fruitfulness comes from intimacy, and the point of intimacy isn't just the fruit either. It's being with Jesus. It's being in love with him and being filled with him. That's what I live for. And she really does. I've been around her from a distance for a couple months at a time, and she's just in love with Jesus. Like, he's what she's thinking about. She's just living her life, like, amazed. Jesus, what do you like? I just want to know you. And as a result of that, there are over 10,000 kids in Mozambique getting fed food every day because of the ministry that has come from her life. And but that's not her focus. Her focus isn't feeding the 10,000 kids or planting the schools or going to the prisons. Her focus is Jesus. And then from that, all the other stuff comes. She's living plugged in, right, to God, the outlet. And as a result, she's shining bright. And we're all invited to live lives like that. We're still on point number 1, in case you wondered. This is step number 1 still, being intimate with Jesus. It's like the foundation of Christianity, the foundation of walking with Jesus. But I just feel the need to say it again because I don't think maybe it can be said enough, is just to spend time with God every day. Just to say, you know what, every day I'm going to set a time, I'm going to read the Bible, and I'm going to talk to Jesus. And that's how intimacy with God is made, and that's how we become the light of the world. That's how we become the salt of the earth. I've also just found it helpful in the midst of that time spending with Jesus to journal God's voice. Like, you can read the Bible, read John 15:9 and say, you know what? God loves me like no differently than he loves Jesus Christ. And then you can just sit in that for a moment and just say, God, wow, do you really love me that much? And just have conversation with God about his love for you. Have a conversation with God about how he's feeling for you, and then write it down. Because all throughout our day, we're going to have plenty of thoughts that aren't true about ourselves and about our lives. So it just seems that the more we can focus on, okay, what does God say about my existence, the more truth is going to fill our head. And it's really important for truth to fill our head. Whenever I journal a little bit every day, I just kind of write down different prayers and thoughts I'm having in a simple little notebook. And when I'm writing down something that I feel like God has said to me, like I just have a sense that God has communicated a sentence with me, when I write that down, I get out this beautiful, big, fat gold marker, and I underline it, because it seems like, God's words deserves to be underlined in gold. So if you want to try that, feel free. Chris Valentin, I was just listening to a message from him this week, and he said this: the kingdom within you becomes the kingdom around you. Doesn't that make sense? If I have deep, deep peace inside of me that just can't be disrupted, whenever I come into a room and begin having conversation with the people in that room, that peace is going to be shared, right? What's happening in me is going to affect the atmosphere of the room. The same, right? If I am a deeply, deeply angry person and I have a lot of stuff inside of me I need to get sorted, then I walk into a room with rage happening inside of me, that's going to affect my conversations, right? And so it just, yeah, if this is the life I want to live, that I'm just beaming this light for Jesus and showing people what he's like, that first needs to happen inside of me. First, I need Jesus to bring his kingdom to my insides. I need to have his peace, his hope, his love, and then from there, I'll be able to affect people like he's affected me, right? Makes sense. It makes sense kind of stuff, I think. Okay, so here we are moving on to point number 2, which is all very intricately connected to point number 1. Just a good practical step, I think, for becoming the light of the world, becoming the salt of the earth, is to pay attention. Just listen to people. I was thinking this week of times in my life, and I've had a few, where I'm like really disrupted, like there's some kind of massive life thing happening, and I'm just having a really hard time. And I think about, how did I get out of that hard time? Call it a pit or a valley, whatever. Like how did things change? How did I get out of that? And whenever I look back at those times in my life, almost always, or maybe even I could say always, it's because someone started paying attention to me. A friend, a family member, a somebody noticed me, started having conversation with me, paying attention to my problem, and God used them to help things change for my life. And I think, I just don't think enough can be said about stopping to pay attention to people, and that God, that is just a really right way to beam Jesus, to show what Jesus is like. Because Jesus, he's paying attention to us right now. He sees you sitting here. He sees me standing here. He's paying attention. And so when we stop to pay attention to other people, we're shining Jesus. The poet, Mary Oliver, said, to pay attention, this is our endless and our proper work. And we can do that, just step number 3, which is all connected to step number 1 and 2. That we don't have to be overwhelmed by, I need to, live this life that's so selfless and giving, and I'm feeding so many people and doing so much good stuff that the entire continent is shifted for the kingdom of God. I think a great, maybe the way to start is with the person that's just right in front of you, just one person at a time. And God wants to use us. He wants to use me, and he wants to use you to really help people's lives. And we can do that one person at a time. Just by paying attention to them, seeing them. If you just decide, hey, you know what? There's not really anybody I'm helping right now. Maybe I'm not super shining a light bright in any one individual's life right now. That can change today. You can go, it could be somebody you already know, or you could go to a nursing home this afternoon, or a place where people are homeless on the street, or a hospital. You don't have to look far to find somebody who could use some love and say, I'm just going to devote some time to this person right now. And like this season of my life, I'm going to hang out with them a couple hours a week, or I'm going to pray with them several times a day. One person at a time, and you can watch and see. It's not because you're some super powerful spiritual thing, but it's because you're a lamp that's plugged in to the source of love and light, and he'll use you to change people's lives. Going right along with loving the person in front of you, the Greek word for love is agape. And when I say this, you guys watched the movie Finding Dory? Finding Nemo, the original one, years ago. So Dory, right, when she saw a mask that said the word, she saw something that said the word escape on it, and she said, escape. You remember? She pronounced escape, That's funny, right? And so almost every time I hear the word agape, I think, agape, because of Dory. I don't know, it was just something in my mind connected agape and escape. So anyway, agape is the Greek word for love that the Bible often uses, and it refers to love that isn't a feeling or because, it feels really great to love you right now, but it's a choice that has nothing to do with feelings, and that says, no matter what's happening, no matter how inconvenient or uncomfortable it is, I'm going to choose to continue to love you. And this is the love of God that he wants all of us to be living in. And so I thought it was just fitting. The word agape kind of goes with a porcupine in my mind, because sometimes, oftentimes, maybe even most of the time, loving people feels kind of like you're trying to bear hug a porcupine. It doesn't feel good. It hurts. It's uncomfortable, and it's just easier to leave the porcupine alone. Okay? Sometimes I am the porcupine that somebody has to love, and it's just not easy. Love is not always easy. But with God's help, we can agape, and we can choose to love people, and by doing so, live up to what Jesus has said about us and being the salt and the light of the world. So this is the teeny tiniest letters you've ever seen on the screen, but don't worry, I'll read it to you. And this is from a teacher named Tim Mackey, and he says, in English, the word love primarily refers to a feeling, an emotion that happens to you. Can you see that Jesus means something very different by agape, something totally different? God has chosen to perform actions of kindness and generosity toward people, regardless of how they behave, regardless of if they like him or if he happens to like what they're doing at the moment. God has chosen to agape. So in Jesus' teaching, it's not like he's asking you to generate warm fuzzies for your enemies. He's asking you to choose to view them in a certain way, to choose to view them the way God sees this person. Within God's economy, this person is beloved. They're a human being. They're made in God's image. And they might be screwed up in ways that are different than me, but they're a human being made in God's image. Yeah. If you ever, something that I pray all the time, if you ever, run out of something to pray, this seems like a really good sentence to say to the Lord, which is, God, teach me how to love. And I think that God likes answering that prayer, and he will continually teach us as we ask him how to love, that he would fill us with love, that we can show people God's kindness even when it's really super hard. Agape. So going along with steps number 1 and 2 is, I think, 4. Wow, we're flying through the steps. Step number 4 is just to make friends with people who are different than you. Seems like God can teach us love in a special way when we get around people who aren't just like us. And HL's been teaching about this recently, that it's our what we want, because what's comfortable is just to be around people that look like me, act like me, same hobbies, talk like me. And again, there's not anything wrong with that. I don't think God's telling me to get rid of all my friends who are like me. But I do believe, and what I sense God telling me, is to make friends that are also quite different than me. They look different than me. They talk different than me. Their views of life are different than me. And that when we do that, I think it shows us more of what God's like, and it makes love grow inside of us. HL said just a couple weeks ago in his sermon, find people who are not like you and hear their stories. If you're a person who rides horses in your free time, maybe you could find someone who listens to punk rock music at punk rock shows in their free time and hang out with them. If you are a white country boy, maybe you could find someone who just moved here to the United States from Nigeria and ask them out to eat and get to know them. Right? Whatever, just think about, okay, what am I like? What do I look like? What are my interests? And then try to think of somebody who might be the absolute opposite of you and try to bond with them and see what happens. What's going to happen is you're going to be really frustrated probably. You're going to have some moments of tension and aggravation, but it's going to be beautiful. And love's probably going to grow in both of your hearts. If you are a big-time Trump supporter, maybe you should find someone who's a big-time Joe Biden supporter and have coffee. Does that sound like a good idea? I think it does. I think Jesus, teach us all how to love. The first time I went to India was in 2011, and I roomed in this little hotel room with a woman who I've known for most of my life named Sue Dismang. And I would wake up in the morning. We had little separate twin beds. I would wake up in the morning to the sound of Sue singing prayers to Jesus. And I'd be there in my bed with my blankets. I'm like, what is she doing? And I look over at her, and she had like a little cute cup of coffee, and she's just like sitting before Jesus, like happy with her coffee, just singing songs to God in India. And it like whenever I was thinking, I was preparing these words to share with you guys today, I was thinking, okay, who's somebody I know that's living like a William Wallace life? Like they're just really making a difference in the world. And this woman came to my mind, and it's because she has these times every single day of her life where she sits before God and sings in prayers and talks to him regularly. And she impacts people in India and in Southern Illinois and in many lands in between because of her connection with Jesus, because she's plugged in to the source of love, which just brings it back. All of it is tied up together, that we need to be on our knees. I want to be known as a person who prays, a person who spends a lot of time on their knees before God. And H said a couple weeks ago, people need to be on their knees, literally. And I believe that if we are wanting to be the people that Jesus has said in Matthew 5:13-16, the light of the world and the salt of the earth that's bringing flavor to people's lives, that's making people thirsty for Jesus, then we need to be people who are spending a lot of time before Jesus, learning his ways, letting him fill us with his love, with agape, and then living these lives that can't help but shine, can't help but love people and help people and show people what God's like.